Lois, and I'd like to welcome you to my kitchen here at It's Time to Cook. We recently celebrated National Cookie Day. Did you have a cookie on National Cookie Day? For me, Cookie Day is any day that I have delicious cookies. I'd like to share a recipe with you today for monster cookies. They're one of my favorite because they are so versatile. You can make them using regular flour or you can make them gluten-free. Today I'm going the gluten-free route. For the dry ingredients, part of them is to use a half a cup of gluten-free flour. If you were making them with regular flour, half a cup of all-purpose flour. One of the main ingredients of the dry is oatmeal. So today I'm using Bob's Red Mill gluten-free oatmeal, and I'm going to use 4 cups of oatmeal. I'm going to measure this out into a food processor, and I'm going to just grind it up a little bit. The old-fashioned has large grains, and for regular oatmeal and for a regular recipe, you could also add just the whole grain without putting it in a food processor. But I want it to be small, ground up, kind of like a flour, because I want it to hold my ingredients better than it does when I use the full grain oatmeal. So just doing some pulses to get this into a flour consistency, and I'm using a metal blade with my food processor. I think this looks really good. This is a great tip also if you have little ones who do not like oatmeal. If you grind it up like this and make a flour out of it, they're going to love these cookies, not even know that they are eating oatmeal. So I'm going to put this in my bowl. I'm going to add my 1/2 cup of gluten-free flour. Again, you can use all-purpose flour. I'm going to use 2 1/2 teaspoons of baking soda that I've already measured out. Sprinkle that in. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. That composes our dry ingredients. I'm going to take a wire whisk and I'm just going to stir those up so that they're well combined before I add them to the wet ingredients, which will be the next part of my preparation. This gets the salt and the baking soda evenly combined, and it also combines that flour in with the oatmeal. And this is what it looks like when it's all combined together. Okay, then the next step is the wet ingredients. The next step is what we consider our wet ingredients. They include 3 eggs, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 stick of unsalted butter, 1 1/2 cups of chunky peanut butter, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1 cup of packed brown sugar. I'm going to begin with the butter. The butter needs to be at room temperature, and one of the ways to kind of check the butter and see if it's ready is if you press your finger down on the butter and it leaves a little indentation. That indicates that your butter is at a good temp. So that's going to go right into my mixing bowl. I'm going to raise it. I'll be using a paddle blade on it, attachment. I'm going to put butter down in. And I always like to just give the butter a brief little cream before I add other ingredients. Some recipes call for butter and sugar creamed together, and then the remaining wet ingredients, for example, eggs added in after that. But this recipe calls for all of this to go in at one time. So I'm putting my paddle blade on, lower and lock. my butter is nice and soft and the stick is broken up. So now I'm going to add the remaining ingredients. The peanut butter is all ready to go in. I pre-measured that. Let me give you a little tip for measuring peanut butter. You may have heard that if you spray your measuring container before you measure, say, honey, syrup, molasses, it's easier to get out. That little tip works for peanut butter also. So I sprayed my 2 measuring cups when I measured this out, and it was much easier to empty them into the bowl. And then I also sprayed just a little bit of non-stick food spray right into my bowl. So that's going right into my mixer. And just a couple of quick scrapes is going to clean that bowl right out. So there is my peanut butter. Then I'm going to add my brown sugar, and that's packed into the measuring cup, and you can see it's still holding the shape of the cup. That's because of the moisture that's in the brown sugar and my white sugar. I'm going to add my eggs. I'm going to crack my eggs into a bowl just so that I don't get any shell in the bowl. And when I crack my eggs, I like to crack them on a flat surface. For example, on my countertop. And no shells, so put them right in. And because the vanilla has a little bit of acid in it, I want to make sure that when I put that in, I'm going to put it in over in a spot where there is no egg, so that it doesn't start coagulating the egg on me. Lower the head, lock it in place, and start the mixer. And I'm going to start it on about a medium speed. First very low, and then bring it up to a medium speed. This speed goes up to number 10, and I don't want to put too much air into it right away and cause that butter to start getting hot. So start it kind of low so that I'm not throwing everything out into my face from the mixer. Speed it up just a little bit. That's going to mix for 2 or 3 minutes. It's looking good. It's getting really smooth. Smell the peanut butter. Stop the mixer. Unlock. Raise the head. I want to scrape the bowl down. Make sure that I don't have any unmixed butter, for example, in the bottom. You can pull the ingredients off of your rubber spatula. Get back down in. A safety tip is never put the spatula in while you are mixing, because it can get away from you and throw it in your face. Looks good. I want to show you what it looks like down in the bowl. Hope you can see that. Uh-oh. I should have cleaned my paddle, right? Okay, I'm going to put it back on. Sometimes those little things happen. And now I'm going to pour my oatmeal, flour, salt, and baking powder in. Slow. Stop and scrape. And this step takes just a couple of minutes. It goes together really well. Another short mix. And that looks good. Now I'm going to scrape my paddle this time. Move it. Bring it over and clean it again. I like to use every bit of dough, not leaving very much on my blade, because that can make maybe a whole cookie or half a cookie. I would rather have it baked as a cookie than throw it away as raw dough. Okay, looking good. I want you to see inside. See how that looks? And notice it didn't have any other wet ingredients other than the eggs and the shortening, or the butter rather, and the peanut butter. Now comes the fun part. For the next step, I'm going to divide this dough into 3 different bowls, and I'm going to add some really yummy things to it, like mini M&Ms, mini chocolate chips, white chocolate. I'm making 3 different cookie flavors from one recipe. That's one of the great things about this recipe. I've divided my cookie dough into 3 separate bowls, tried to do it as evenly as possible, and this is what I'm going to put in the first bowl. I'm going to put some mini M&Ms and some mini chocolate chips. I have about a 1/3 cup of each in these little dish bowls. So I'm just going to simply stir this in by hand. You don't want to stir it with a mixer because it's going to break up, especially your M&Ms. So just stir in. And this combination is for my little munchkin named Patch. I'm sure some of the big munchkins in my family is going to love this combination also. And because this dough is a little thick, that was part of my decision for making sure that my oats were ground up before to make a flour out of them, so that it can hold all of these ingredients. All right, we have lots of mix-ins here. Looks yummy for those chocolate lovers. The next bowl, I'm going to have a mixture of raisins, some more oats, just for that whole grain feel in your mouth so that you know you're eating oatmeal raisin cookies. And then I'm going to add just a few chopped walnuts. And because I'm adding 3 ingredients in here, I'm going to start by not adding the full amount of these. Just kind of get an idea for how much of these ingredients this amount of dough is going to take. So something like this to start. Oatmeal raisin cookies are one of the favorites from my childhood. I can remember going home from school, being starving to death, and looking in the cabinet for something to eat, finding the oatmeal container, which had the recipe right on the box for Quaker, and getting the raisins out, and my sister and I making oatmeal raisin cookies. Sometimes we would try to make them even when we didn't have all the ingredients. that was probably a bit of a disaster, but when you're a starving school kid, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it really doesn't matter. Okay, I think that's a good amount for this oatmeal raisin cookie. And my last one is my personal favorite. So for this one, I'm going to add some white chocolate chips. And again, I'm not going to put them all because I have 4 ingredients this time. I'm going to put some chopped pecans, some dried cranberries or craisins, and some coconut. One of the nuts that I love to use when I have white chocolate chips is macadamia nuts. They tend to be a bit on the expensive side though, so when I buy them, I ration them out. And let me give you a tip right here about storing nuts. I always store my nuts in the freezer. That way, the oils in the nuts don't turn rancid and they last a long time. And here in North Alabama, pecan trees grow really well and produce usually very well. And so if you have access to pecan trees, you can harvest them, take the meat out of the shells, and package them up and freeze them, and they will last for 2 or 3 years and stay really nice. Okay, these are all mixed together. Now let's talk about portioning these cookies out. What I'm going to be using today is a food scoop. Excuse me. With a food scoop, if it's a professional food scoop, it's going to have right inside on the little piece that actually scoops the dough out, it's going to have a number on it, and that indicates the size. A really good standard size food scoop for cookies is a number 40. That's about 2 tablespoons. So these cookies are monster in that you can add all of these different ingredients and not in the fact that they're going to be giant big cookies that take up a half or a third of a sheet pan. So what I'm going to do is to put a piece of parchment paper on my baking sheet, and I have a commercial half sheet pan. If you can get access to these sheet pans, they are wonderful for all kinds of baking, roasting veggies, cookies, making big bar cookies where you have this whole pan filled up with, say, brownies. The cookies that I'm making today are called drop cookies. So open up the paper, and these that come in the little box already pre-folded are really handy. If you don't have parchment paper to bake on, you can use a cooking spray that I talked about a bit ago with spraying your containers if you're trying to measure something that wants to cling. So you can also lightly spray it with a cooking spray. To scoop the cookies, what you're going to do is just simply go in and fill up your food scoop and kind of press it against the edge of your bowl so that it's leveled off, just like this. And then you're going to drop these right on your cookie sheets. And with this kind of parchment paper, it actually has grids on it, so it's easy to space them out. If you're not using a parchment with grids, what you can do is use kind of 2-finger spacing. So you want to make sure your cookies are at least 2 fingers away from the edges and also from each other, so that when they spray it, they're not going to run together. The beauty of the food scoop is that your cookies are all going to be portioned the same size. So what I'm going to do is do 3 cookies of my favorite, and then 3 of the other 2. So for now, I'm going to bake a total of 9 cookies. And then I'll show you after they come out of the oven what they look like. Oh, that was my 3rd cookie there. So now, oatmeal raisin with walnuts. usually for a standard size cookie like this, the number 40 scoop, what you can get on a pan is usually about a dozen cookies. So 4 rows down and 3 cookies across gets that for you. And if you don't have the cookie scoop, what you can do is use a large, what we usually call a tablespoon from your flatware. Sometimes people use it for soup. It's the larger one, and it's not really a tablespoon by measure, but you can scoop it up with that. And for this last one, let me show you what you can do. You can just take your hand, because this dough is nice and pliable, and you can take a size, pick up about the size of a nice walnut, and you can simply roll it in your hands like that. And that's a quick and easy way, and that's really a great way if you have young children that are helping you with the cookie baking. So now what I'm going to do is simply just take 2 fingers and just do a light little press, because these cookies do not spread very much. And then I'm going to pop them into a 350-degree oven. See? Beautiful. The cookies are ready to go into the oven. I have a preheated 350-degree oven open. I'm going to bake them on the middle rack. So I'm going to put them like so, middle, baking only 1 pan at a time. I'm going to set my timer for 12 minutes. This works for my oven. Your oven might be just a little bit different, and you may have to check your cookies just a little bit earlier. After 1 minute, after 12 minutes, I'm going to turn my pan around so that the front cookies go to the back, and I'm going to set my timer for 1 more minute, and then they will come out of the oven, and I will put them on a wire rack, leaving them on the pan so that they can cool. Okay, my timer just went off for the 2nd time. Look at that, beautiful. Let me give you a little tip. For most cookies, if they are still just a little bit soft looking in the center and they are golden brown around the edges, that means that they are done. Beautiful, can't wait. Cookies are out of the oven. They rested on the wire rack for about 3 minutes until they set up. And once they set up, I took them off of the pan and put them right on the rack. And this is the finished product. This one, again, as I said earlier, is my favorite, with the white chocolate chips, the craisins, the nuts, the coconut. Oh, yum. Just a little bit of chew in the center, nice and crunchy on the outside edges. And let me tell you also something that you can do for all of these cookies that are already portioned out on the trays. I line 2 trays with wax paper. I portioned the cookies out by flavor. And what I'm going to do next is just simply slip these into the freezer just like this and let them freeze. Once they're frozen, I'm going to take them off, and I'm going to put them in freezer bags, label them with today's date and with also the flavor, and indicate that they are gluten-free, because sometimes I make non-gluten-free, and I want to know that for those people in my family who need to have the gluten-free. As you portion them out, make sure you leave just a little space so that when they are frozen, you can pick them up, they're not sticking together, put them right in the bag, you're good to go. Then when you want to bake some of those cookies off, simply take out the amount that you would like to bake, put them on your cookie pan, let them sit for maybe half an hour or so, kind of check them from time to time. Once they're defrosted, do that little press like we did before, pop them into the oven. You have fresh cookies. So if somebody came unexpectedly, you would be able to serve them refreshments maybe. Or you can bake in advance and have them for holidays or for overnight guests. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you have learned some new tips that will help you in your cookie baking. And again, National Cookie Day or any day of the week is a good day when you have a nice, yummy cookie. See you next time in my kitchen here at It's Time to Cook.